sort of after what feels like the most tedious, foregone conclusion of an election imaginable, but they don't exactly come into a rosy economic picture. It doesn't feel like a partisan point to say that the UK economy and UK households have really struggled for the last decade. What do Labour really need to do in order to get the economy moving again? We're going to split this into two halves. The first half is going to be stuff that they can do for free, that doesn't cost them vast sums of money. And in the second half, we're going to be going through, if they were to loosen those rules a little bit, what would be some of the high, top tier, A-grade level stuff that they could go after. The first thing that they can do is open up the rulebook with the EU. I'm not talking about customs unions, I'm not talking about single market, but starting to go through sector by sector renegotiations. So this would be things like mutual recognition of qualifications. We have lots of lawyers and accountants, investment bankers based here in the UK. To be able to mutually recognise those qualifications in the UK and the EU would be a good first step. To come up with touring visas. One of the most vocal opponents to Brexit were independent musicians, where touring makes up a large and important part of their income early in their career. Supporting other creative industries like the film industry. Again, transporting equipment and people onto the continent is much more difficult, and the creative industries are proving to be even more important in the UK economy. We could talk about streamlining border checks for particular industries. Take, for instance, the aerospace industry. The UK still produces high-tech jet engines, largely through Rolls-Royce, which are then used in Airbus airframes, which are assembled in France. If we're able to streamline some of those processes, then that is to everyone's benefit. These things can take a long time, but it doesn't cost the UK a dime to do. The next free thing that they can do is look at the planning system. So just to give you an illustrative example, Eli Lilly, which is basically one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, wanted to open another production centre. They looked at doing it in the UK. Their CEO said that the UK is a great place to do business, but they were basically told that the approval process in order to get a new production facility built would take them years and millions of dollars, and this effectively just leads to a gumming up of the economy. It's difficult for people to be more productive when, in order to build new facilities to make people more productive, the sunk costs are just absolutely enormous. Now, as a sub-point to this is going to be looking at housing. At the moment, the way the housing system works is it's basically left up to local councils, and so you get these very unequal housing outcomes. But this is potentially one of, I think, the most important things that Labour is going to do. What they're basically going to do is they're going to assume that all planning applications will pass on the basis that it meets some key criteria. Taking this new approach to planning, I think it's going to really help not only build more houses, which the UK is in dire need of, but also to employ people in the interim whilst those houses are being built. Now, changes to planning, much like renegotiating with the EU, is going to take a long time, and it's going to be a couple of years before we would see any real meaningful output from it. So whilst it is free, it does have its downsides. Raising the minimum wage. Now, this has been shown time and again to improve people's living standards, but most importantly, it's been found to benefit those on the lower end of the pay scale the most. Changes to capital gains tax. One of the other things that the new Labour government could do is they could make sure that capital gains are taxed in the same way that income is taxed. One of the key features of the tax system that we find ourselves working under at the moment is if you work for your money, that is taxed very differently as income. But if you earn income from the ownership of assets, then that is taxed very differently. But £100 earned through your labour is no different than £100 earned through your capital, and so maybe they should be taxed the same. The IPPR estimates that this would raise 90 billion over 5 years. Now, that's a pretty significant financial boost, and that starts to give the government a bit of headway when it comes to enacting some of these bigger policies which are likely to come with slightly higher price tags. Simplify the tax code. This is kind of a murky one. It might potentially cost the government some money, but I think one of the things that we've talked about, and we talked about endlessly in this video, is that the UK tax system is unbelievably complicated. There are so many fiscal cliffs where actually a pay rise can make you worse off. So just making the tax system a bit more simple, having some benefits taper rather than just completely fall away. It should not necessarily be the case that by earning £1 more, you lose thousands of pounds in benefits. Investing in R&D. The UK has not necessarily done that well when it comes to R&D. So one of the things that the government could look at is reclassifying some particular expenses as being R&D related, and then therefore making them tax deductible. It incentivises companies to go out and spend their money on research and development, and the government can basically pick and choose its winners. If the government wants to become a green energy powerhouse, or it wants to become the next superpower when it comes to AI, then make things that are related to that. tax deductible. That's really something where you're not necessarily using public money to get there, you're using private money, but there are broader effects and broader benefits that the rest of the economy would feel. For the most part, financial literacy isn't taught in schools. Educating people on financial matters earlier on in their lives can help them make much better financial decisions later on in life. And so the government could just make this part of the curriculum to learn about some of these things, how to manage your money, how to create a budget, even just like financial literacy 101. There will always be those that will spend their student loan on a new car or bottle service or some other mad shit like that. But lots of younger people might want to make smarter financial decisions. That's the easy stuff. That's the stuff that doesn't necessarily cost the government a great deal. Now we're going to move on to the bit more pie in the sky, the bit more reach for the stars stuff, where they're going to have to crack open their checkbook. And the first thing is going back to the original Green commitment of £28 billion per year. So the Labour government had initially committed to spending £28 billion per year to help the economy move over and make a green transition. They had committed to this, creating tens of thousands of new jobs in sectors that were going to be in demand for decades to come. The UK economy, as we've talked about endlessly in other videos, is in desperate need of investment. This would be a twofold benefit. It helps us to achieve net zero, but it is also investing in skills which are going to be in demand in future. If the UK fulfills its commitments to being a green energy powerhouse, then these are skills which can then be exported over abroad as other countries in other parts of the world start to make the transition to more environmentally friendly and renewable power sources. Investing in its own research and development. We mentioned earlier that the government can incentivise private businesses to invest in research and development that it thinks is going to be worthwhile and strategically beneficial. The government can just crack open its checkbook and put it on the plastic, do it itself. And just take a look at South Korea. South Korea is a country that has invested unbelievably heavily in research and development, and you look at the economic transformation that it has gone through in the last 50 or 60 years. Research and development also helps to boost worker productivity, and productivity is, again, something that the UK, as we can see in this graph here, productivity is something that the UK economy desperately needs in order to get out of this economic malaise that we find ourselves in. Investing in digital infrastructure. As you can see here, the UK ranks appallingly when it comes to access to high-speed internet. Absolutely shocking stuff. So making sure that we are a services-based economy that has access, or that has much better access to faster internet, just seems like an absolute no-brainer. Now, the Conservatives had committed to spending £5 billion in order to get us there, but the truth is that money started to dry up and the programme started to fall behind schedule as a result. Boosting education funding. So there has been a long understood correlation between having an educated workforce and positive economic outcomes. Let's just take a look at here. Under the austerity years, spend per pupil absolutely collapsed under the Conservative government and has only really recently started to pick up again. But, as with some of the free examples, this is one where it will cost the government money now, but we won't see the benefits for a decade from now, 2 decades from now. So this is a real investment in positive longer-term economic outcomes, but you are setting these young people up for success. So what I really wanted to outline is that the challenges facing the UK economy are absolutely vast. One of the things that we've talked about in a previous video is there are not necessarily areas of the economy that are doing well and some that are doing badly. It's a pretty bleak picture almost no matter where you look, and so therefore the effort needed to start to move the economy in the right direction is a Herculean task and will require gargantuan effort. Not absolutely everything that will be positive for the economy is going to require vast, great big checks to be written, but I think it is also fair to say that there is just some stuff where it's unavoidable. Investing in education, investing in healthcare, you can do things to make those areas more efficient, but at the end of the day, sometimes it will just need cold hard cash. So I think by taking advantage of the stuff that's free and then starting to throw some money behind some of these other projects, that's when you start to really get things going. So many of these economic variables, they're interlinked with one another. If you boost investment, investment boosts productivity. But if you're investing in productivity, as we can see on this diagram here, productivity is so closely aligned to wages. And so you start to get this virtuous cycle. Now, this is proven to be problematic for the UK economy for the better part of the last decade, because it also means that once one of these variables starts to slow down or grind to a halt, you end up in the downward spiral.